the Cardinals, their work with the bullpen, I did find it interesting that all of the guys that they've brought in, do have kind of a Chaim Bloom connection there. So that's actually reassuring.
It's interesting.
It's really reassuring.
Yeah.
Like every one of those guys they've picked up where we all, and when I say we, I'm not talking about you.
Yeah.
Where the rest of us who, follow it but not as closely, some of the stuff when, players are moved, they're not named players, you're kind of like, who? Mm-hmm. Why did they want him? I never heard of him. That kind of reaction.
Yeah, they throw hard. They throw sliders.
Yeah,
and they miss bats.
But to see
they might not do it consistently. They might have a health concern.
Yeah,
but they might also have it all come together, and the Cardinals want to be the team that it happens for.
And every single one of those dudes that they got, it's got a Chaim Bloom connection. So all of a sudden, I'm like, well. Now I'm intrigued. I'm not saying, they're going to be great. Yeah. I'm just saying, now you got my attention on these guys. Anyway, that said, even if some of that crop that maybe Chaim Bloom had an influence on getting here, even if there's a success story or two, what I think is like they need more of a sure thing down there to supplement the guys that they already have on staff that they like. They have a lot of variables and maybes. Mm-hmm. They need strength in numbers, so they probably are going to be better in that area this year. But do they have enough substantive relief help? Established pitchers with track records and credibility in the big leagues?
No.
No?
No.
I thought you said I don't know. I'm like, wait a minute.
I know.
It's time for me to retire. Derrick Goold says I don't know.
No. I mean.
Of course not. Of course not.
They don't.
And that bothers me from a lot of different angles. Why would they want to sort of leave themselves vulnerable like this?
They don't have a Chris Stratton, just to put a point on.
And he was good.
Like that's what they need, right? Like a veteran guy who's going to throw strikes, who can be a chase reliever. They don't really have that chase reliever. Now they have a young guy in that spot. So do they think that Gio's going to be that guy with his experience? And he's going to be replaced as the setup guy. Well, that's not really agreeable. That's not what they want. They don't want to have him not be in a prominent role. They'd like for him to be like he has been, be a valuable. Well, when he's at his best, they want him to be there. So who's the chase guy? Who's the guy who's pitching when they're down by 3 and they're in the 6th inning? Who's the guy who's pitching when they're down by 2 in the 7th? Who holds it there and allows the offense to run it down, or holds it there and finishes it off so the bullpen can be ready the next day when you're up by 2 in the 7th and you didn't exhaust your guys the day before. I mean, that's the guy. Like, who's that guy?
Right.
Who's that? And usually it's an experienced pitcher who might be making some money. Who's been around. I mean, Russ Springer was that guy. Chris Stratton was that guy. Sometimes, you go way back 20 years ago, Cal Eldred had some of that role.
Well, that's right.
So, it's that. And Chris Stratton was he was good in those spots.
He was really good. Yep.
And, there was a discussion at one point in time in the clubhouse about, who they could have gone to close out a game. And the question was pushed back at the reporters, and I went Chris Stratton, and one of the coaches goes, "You don't really mean that," and I go, "Yeah, I really do." And it was the coach had made the same advocacy like that. It wasn't that he was denying it, but he was like, "That's my guy. That's the guy I'm gonna." But you're a sports writer, you can't possibly know that. It's like. Well, he throws strikes, and when at a time the Cardinals needed that, have a guy go out there and throw strikes. They don't have that. I mean, they have guys who throw strikes, but they don't have that veteran guy. Chris is over in Kansas City. He's signed as a free agent, but there are still plenty of available guys out there.
Yeah,
now.
What do you think? This may tie into what else I was going to ask you, but actually, it's a good way to get into that. What do you make of the payroll situation? What do you make of their willingness? Potentially make of their willingness to add to that.
They're going to add. They want to add. They're open to add to it.
I'm not talking about Josh Hader. I'm realistic.
Right. And it might not be Jordan Hicks.
Yeah.
But it could be, any of these handful of other guys.
There's a lot of them out there still.
There are. There's still Brazier out there, and that's the kind of price point where the Cardinals have been living. He has other options out there, including the Dodgers at the least and some other contending teams. But he would be that guy, right? Like he would be that chase guy or even more a setup guy. He also has the connection to Chaim Bloom. Before he was one of the moves that was made to get him out of Boston, and then he kind of remade his season and had just a terrific second half when he started throwing a cutter in with the Dodgers. But but he was really good for Chaim Bloom's playoff teams there, big part of that bullpen. So you see, like, there's another fingerprint. But he would be that guy. Phil Maton, a local guy, has, probably command a higher salary than maybe where the Cardinals are living right now. But, that'd be a fit for this kind of spot. And he has the track record over the last few years with the Houston bullpen. And he's not alone. There are 3 members of the Houston bullpen who are all still available.
Neris and who's the one?
Stanek.
That's right. I always forget about Stanek.
Born in St. Louis.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, named for Ryan Sandberg, but born in St. Louis.
He's going to have to come home then. So.
Yeah, I don't think he grew up here, but if you're looking for things that are a theme, there you go. There are options still out there. There's obviously trades, unknown trades. I'm not sure. I was looking back on the tea leaves and everything like that, and I don't think there was anything that came up with Kittredge that would tie the Cardinals to him until it happened.
Right.
So there's always trades like that could.
I like the way he ended last season after having almost 2 years wiped out with Tommy John, but his final 9 or 10 appearances, strikeout rate was really good. He walked one guy, a lot of swing and miss. I think he gave up 1 run. He was really good. So it looked like you always wonder about the Tommy John guys, like how long is it going to take to where they're intact? Like Waino has talked about that to you and to others, including me at the time. He kind of underestimated, even though he was 100% healthy in 2012, how tough it was to pitch in 2012, even though physically everything was in proper working order. But it's almost like you can't get it sharp in the way you need it to be. Your transplanted elbow ligament is still, still getting adjusted. So you have to adjust. And by the following season, of course, he was vintage Waino. But it looked like Kittredge, towards the end of his comeback last year, was starting to find that again. So I think he'll have I would have an optimistic view of him for 2024.
He was on the podcast we started all those years ago that's about to go into its 12th season here. He was a guest on it. I had a chance to talk with him on Monday.
Good.
And that podcast, the best podcast in baseball, is now up with him.
Oh, okay.
And in it, I asked him how superstitious he was, because I wanted to ask him about the stat. And you come back from Tommy John. Guys talk about different things, but command is usually something that they're like, it's not quite there crisp and everything like that. He's walked five of the last 211 batters he's faced.
That's an amazing stat.
Isn't that unbelievable?
That's an amazing stat.
5. I went back to look through it game by game, and some of that bookends his surgery, right?
That's a good couple of innings for Dakota.
Dakota 5. We saw innings where there were 5 walks.
That's right,
including 2 with the bases loaded.
I know.
But 5 in 200, and so I asked him about that and about how did that come back, because and he said it just is something that he's believed, and it fit and meshed with the Rays approach, and it just has been a priority for him. It helps that he has a slider that he can throw for a strike and get people to miss it. That is kind of that's a differentiator.
Derrick Goold is with us. Let me ask you about this, because I was this was one of these things that's on my mind. It was on my mind today, where I wanted to roll up the sleeves and do a somewhat of a deep dive on Lance Lynn. What, in your opinion, and based on conversations you've had with others, in your opinion, what's going to have to happen, even if it's realistic, to expect him to have a really nice bounce back season. I mean, the obvious answer that we all know is, well, he can't give up 48 home runs, which he did when you include the postseason game.
That was not good.
But it's like, how do you even get that down to 30 or something? But like just
you put him at Busch Stadium.
I was going to say.
Solved.
I was going to say they got the Busch Stadium.
What's next?
But also, what is it? And this is what I didn't find the answer.
Yeah.
What about is it like in terms of like the pitches that he throws? Like is the fastball velocity is down a bit, but it's not awful. He still had swing and miss stuff. Mm-hmm. I thought, okay, he wasn't putting guys away, but actually he was better than I thought I would see.
When he got ahead, he was done.
So I'm trying to figure out, like, what in terms of his pitch arsenal, what was vulnerable and what can be fixed with a pitcher of his age. Like, I'm trying to figure the path back other than getting some help from Busch Stadium.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any wisdom to dispense.
I have questions more than I have wisdom.
Yeah.
It strikes me as this is just something about my spidey sense is tingling. That it's more than a coincidence that the two guys who gave up more than 40 home runs both pitched for the White Sox.
Interesting,
you
right?
Lucas Giolito and Lance Lynn. They both struggled with home runs. They both strike out guys. And there was a time before Lucas Giolito went off to the Angels where he was still the most coveted starter available for trade. You look at his numbers. So what was it? Why did two guys who pitched for a team that was going nowhere, was struggling, was lost, was supposed to contend, why did they struggle specifically with a bloated home run total? So something is there.
It's
and
just really, I know, right?
There's got to be
there's a puzzle there that I'm trying to solve.
There's an approach. There's pitch calling. There's pitch scripting. There's were they tipping? What?
I think some Cardinals people believe that.
Yeah, I mean, so what? Yeah, that they usually do. That's their default. But I mean, it's fine. It's fine. And sometimes it's true. A lot of times it's true. But I think there is something there, and they're both similar. They're not similar. No, they are. They're similar pitchers. Both. They don't pitch the same way, but they're similar enough that. And I think there's something there, and I don't have any doubt that like Lance either has an opinion. Well, he definitely has an opinion on what it was, and there doesn't seem to be any doubt that, like, look, a reset button for him and Giolito, they're both going to be pretty good because neither of them are White Sox.
Well, and
I like
that the White Sox home park is, including, according to Statcast park factors, is I think tied for the 11th easiest home run park.
And it played. I wish I knew the numbers.
And the Dodgers were number 2 behind Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Dodger
Stadium. And
so that's Lance Lynn got bit, there too.
Yeah, and also like there's such a small sample size there with the Dodgers. Who knows? It just he could have been searching for ways to get guys out and just left himself vulnerable. There's a lot. I don't know, but there's enough there that it's like, all right, what gives with the fastballs that were getting crushed by these two guys at a ballpark that is friendly for home runs and was more so last year.
Lance Lynn, he did this some in St. Louis, but trying to sort of backfill on some of my knowledge on him since he left St. Louis. He's made decisions along the way. It's like, I'm tired of this pitch. I'm not throwing that anymore. I'm going to throw this. Like he dumped the slider for the cutter.
Yeah.
And the cutter was awful last season, just awful.
It's a high risk, high reward pitch.
And he used
Dallas Keuchel wins a Cy Young with it one year and can't get anybody out the next.
Lynn did use the slider last year, although the percentage of sliders thrown was small, but he used it, and the results were good. Now, you talk about small sample. I don't know if that means he should throw it more often, But he once basically said, "Screw you, slider. I'm done with you. Mm-hmm. Cutter, come on over. You're my friend." And does he need to kick? Does he need to take the cutter and throw him out and then bring the slider back? I don't know.
I mean, I'm probably the wrong.
I know. I don't know either. But that's just I'm spitballing here. Or does he need to throw a spitball? Maybe
the cutter is always like, it's a really good pitch, except for when it's not, and when it's not, it's a home run. And I remember, it's one of my. It was a story that I could not wait to do, because it was in an all-star game, and I went around and talked to all these guys who threw cutters, and I was talking to them about why do you put such faith in a pitch that if you don't have it that day, you get rocked. It's not even like you get out; you get rocked. And also, I was really fascinated by why is that the pitch?
Right.
Why does that pitch behave that way? And obviously, I mean, it's movement, right? It's if it's not quite enough, it finds the barrel of the bat as opposed to the hands, right? All right. So
I don't know what he's going to do, but there's a lot there.
He's going to throw a lot of fastballs.
There's a lot there.
He's going to be unapologetic, and he's going to throw 180 innings, and that is very valuable.
I was looking at specific counts today.
Yeah.
And I didn't see things that I kind of thought going in. Okay, this has got to have something to do with it, and it's no. I mean, when he would work deep into counts, I thought, well, he's getting up there in age. He's probably not in optimum shape. He's got the pitch clock. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's pitching deeper into counts, and that's where he gets into trouble. And it's no. Some of his best counts as a pitcher were 2-2, 3-2.
I'm not really one for predictions, but here's one for you. I'm going to bet that he and Wilson Contreras get along great as a battery. I mean,
I love the idea.
I'm not even some of the things.
Why do you think?
Well, some of the things that Wilson was asking, pleading, begging,
be mean,
the pitchers to do. Yeah. Some of the things that he told me in Seattle, he goes, he said that. He goes, why don't they pitch mean? They need to pitch mean. Why won't these guys pitch mean? He said it on the record.
I know. That was one of the great quotes of the year.
Yeah, and he's not going to have that problem with Lance.
No.
Lance will be like, can I pitch meaner?
I could see a brotherhood there.
I think
no doubt.
There's something there.
There's no doubt.
Just enough, where I think that's going to be a. Do you
think? See, I don't want to stereotype Lynn. I love Lance Lynn, and his personality is part of the things that's great about him.
Yeah,
there's not much of a filter there. Do you think though? Do you think a guy like Dusty Blake can help him? Yeah. Would he be receptive to that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
No question.
I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, look, no, I don't see. I mean, Lance calls it like he sees it, and sometimes calls it like he wants to see it. Or is that the right way to say it? He can be a contrarian.
Oh, no doubt.
I mean, he's as close to that clubhouse as they've had in a long time to Scott Rowland. I mean, there's two Indiana guys with some similarities.
I agree.
With they're contrarian, but that doesn't mean they don't care. That also doesn't mean that they don't pay attention. And they also are extremely committed. And if you can help them without bluster or posing, they will embrace you.
That's some good news here from D. Goold.
And I think that now their opinion of who's posing might be different than ours, right?
Oh, back in the day.
Yeah.
Some of those conversations with Lance Lynn off the record.
Yeah, you might go well, that really doesn't connect with the guy I know.
Yeah. Roland was a gem, man.
He's great.
When he first came to the Cardinals, and I can tell this out of school, and this is not it's hard to explain. It's one of those things where, you don't want to always talk out of school about a conversation that's ancient history, but because it's ancient history, But Roland was such a contrarian, and this was early on during his time here, and he said, you raise hell a lot. I know. He said you get people down here irritated, and that's good. I respect that. So I want to ask you something. I said, what? I'm like, where's this going? Mm-hmm. He said, listen, I think Albert Pujols is one of the greatest players I've ever seen. I love him. Don't get me wrong. The guy is unbelievable. He said, but I don't understand certain things. I want to ask you something. Maybe you can fill me in. I said, well, what? He said, I don't expect him to run 100 miles an hour, if ground balls. But he said, sometimes when he's really not running that hard, I just want to know, is he hurting? Is he hurting? And so he said, so I go over and ask this coach. He said, oh, yeah, well, Albert's, it's his calf. He says, blah, blah. And he said, then I go over and talk to another coach. He says, well, his back's bothering him. Then I go over and talk to another coach, and he said, well, he kind of jammed his foot. And Roland's like, do they just make this stuff up? He said, I don't care that he doesn't run hard, but I want to know, is there something going on? And he said, why? How come they're all like, you go to 10 different people, they give you 10 different answers. He said, I'm just curious about that. I'm like, I may even use the word contrarian. I said, you're such a contrarian. Yeah. He's funny. One time with the young Joey Votto, I'm talking to him in the Reds visiting clubhouse at Busch Stadium. Long conversation, and Joey Votto comes in, and Joey Votto was dressed extravagantly, very eccentric, kind of had the hipster things of the day, like the man purse and all that stuff. And Roland's like giving him the side eye, and he said, "Going to have to talk to him again." Just going to have to talk to that boy again, So anyway, Joey Votto's a national treasure, though. So
he is.
I wasn't taking a shot at him.
Yeah,
he really is.
He is great.
Let's take a time out here. I want to get to that Ali Marmol question, and there's still some other things, but it's also fun to tell stories. So, that's part of baseball. If you can't tell some stories. Roland is just you're right. What a contrarian. I mean, just
I love the fact here. This little thing that slipped through. His speech was great. His speech at Cooperstown, fantastic. I mean,
it was absolutely one of the best.
It's one of the best ever, and it's going to change how people give those speeches. You guys watch, because he didn't thank everybody. He went and thanked them personally before with notes or with everything like that. And I think that's going to change how some of the speeches from here are delivered.
It was
so good. But he dropped a John Steinbeck reference in his speech without referencing John Steinbeck. Like, he didn't go, look at me, here I am making that. And it wasn't even like a direct reference. It was a joke. It was like a joke that he dropped in there. And I was like, that guy, like, how? I was talking to him later. I was like, was that it was on purpose, right? And he goes, how well do you know me? It was totally on purpose.
He's so
It was
funny.
Incredible.
What a great character.
It was so great.
Only baseball player I ever covered where, you could just have a very casual conversation about Ayn Rand with.
Yeah.
It's just like,
he did it. Yeah.
Just, one of my favorite. There's so many characters you meet doing this, and I've told this story before, so I apologize. Kent Merker was one of my favorite guys to cover, not because he just was out there, and he was also just a cordial, fun guy. We were talking one time because he was a JFK assassination conspiracy theorist, and he's very passionate about that. And I was telling him, well, I'm a contrarian on that. I think actually the Warren Commission got that right. People just didn't want to believe that this little runt Oswald could pull this off, but he did. And so Merker's looking at me like I'm the biggest idiot, and then he starts talking about this theory and that theory and this theory and that. And I said, well, no. See, that's where I know all you guys are wrong. He says, what? He said, because you've given me 7 or 8 different theories. Mm-hmm. Well, which one was it? Mm-hmm. You're throwing theories against the wall, and the more you throw out there, the more you're telling the world that you really don't know. Mm-hmm. So I'm right. And he was laughing, and he was laughing, and he was laughing until a coach came up to him and said, you're supposed to be warming up right now. So what kind of he was starting that night.
Oh my gosh.
What kind of major league pitcher can you debate the Kennedy assassination theories with?
That's pretty
to good. And he's about to go out and start a game, and he's late to get to the bullpen. That's why baseball players are different than the rest. They really are. Current business, your enlighten us on the Chaim Bloom hiring.
Big deal.
What it means in the moment and in the immediate future, what it could mean for a longer-term future for the Cardinals.
I think you may remember, you may have been there. I know we certainly talked about it, but gosh, it wasn't too long ago. Maybe, actually, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago. where they were announcing an extension, and they were talking about continuity. And I asked Bill DeWitt if continuity at some point in time builds a silo and creates staleness. And, one of the things that was going on was like they were always hiring internally. They were always promoting internally. And I was like, well, who from the outside is going to come in and disrupt a little bit? And I thought, different than the front office, still part of it. I thought hiring Skip Schumacher was a really interesting move in that regard, because here was a guy who had Cardinal roots but had gone elsewhere and had seen other organizations, good, bad, indifferent, could speak to the good things the Dodgers do, could speak to the good thing the Padres do, could also then say, look, there are things the Cardinals do really well, better than them too. Almost a validation, but also an audit. And that outside eye, I thought, was really valuable to them. And that, and Skip brought that to that bench coach spot. That's what Chaim Bloom's bringing to the front office is. And clearly it's not he's available. That's part of it. They've had long conversations. It goes back to November. He also brings that kind of raised touch with the success they've had developing pitching, which is
that's so
really
huge.
On the mind
that's so
of the
big.
Cardinals now. And it should be, because they're not spending the prices to get these ace pitchers, so they're going to have to develop.
Right. That's exactly right, and that's kind of the point. I've become a little bullheaded about this. I'm not in any way defending Bill DeWitt or saying I don't blame him. I'm out of that business as far as this one particular issue. Do I think they should spend more? Yeah. Should they stretch it? Yeah. But I spent a long time on the show the last couple of days, not today, pointing out that the reason why, we collectively are all hollering like, no, you have to spend to go get this guy. You have to. And why the payroll has become such an obsession and fixation with a lot of the fans. To me, it ignores or just downplays the real problem, and the real shame of it all is they took what was an organizational strength for so long, drafting and developing their own pitchers and supplementing them with really smart risks like Chris Carpenter, knowing he couldn't pitch for a year, but knowing the payoff would be immense, which it was. They're in this position because they had a strength and it's now a weakness, and that leaves you scrambling, and still not ready to take the plunge into the high end of the market. I had a stat yesterday. From the 5-year period that ended in 2019, the Cardinals had 62 wins above replacement from players that they drafted, signed as amateurs and developed. Okay, we'll just call them homegrowns. They had 62 WAR from starters and relievers all together for those 5 seasons. The last 5 seasons, and granted, one of them was the shortened season, but still, the wins above replacement from homegrown pitchers was 12.
Yeah.
I mean, that right there is all you need to know. They lost their way with pitching, and it's really damaged them. And Mo was able to scramble and cover, but the bottom fell out in 2023.
Yeah, there are 2 parts of that. Baseball America recently did like a look at the 2012 through present drafts and what teams got the most from their pitching picks, and they found that the Cardinals were number 1.
Yeah, and I thought that was misleading.
It's front-loaded.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's front-loaded from all those years. What has happened isn't, and I like the stats that you gave. It's not just related to the past 5 years. It's related to what developed is like this donut hole that we talked about at the time that was in the middle there. Like you think about like just before the Alcantara, Gallen, Flaherty group, right? Just before then, there was like a little bit of a desert. There was the super group that helped him get to the 2013 pennant. And then there was this lag. And then there was this other group on the horizon with basically after Waka and Marco Gonzalez, there was a lag.
Right.
And it was like, how quickly will Flaherty and Alcantara and that group then come aboard? And so what happened is then they traded from that depth and never got the performance to kind of catch up. And so it's not just that over the past 5 years they've only gotten 12 WAR. It's that they didn't have the carousel going to give them any consistency in the middle there to allow for even some of these young guys to get up. I mean, it's –
and a lot of swings and misses on first, second, even third-round draft picks.
Yeah, and not – right, exactly. And not a lot of swing and miss in there as the game went, swing and miss.
Right.
I think one of the moments of this past year, and if you want to know, like, the straw that put him over, the small move, the one Jenga block that led to the tower falling, one of the final three is assigning Dakota Hudson to AAA in spring training. That was a guy who, in the development terms, with the sinker and everything he had, needed to provide at the very least innings. At the very least, he's a pitcher who you needed innings from. And there was the decision at spring training that he could not even do that. And the moment they did that, that left them somewhat exposed. There were other things that happened, but the moment they did that, it was kind of an alarm that went off and said they have not developed this pitcher to the point that they can trust him to, at the very least, provide innings. Where is that? Where did this go right? Now he had surgery in there and he had, but that's also what development is part of, is bringing that guy back to throw strikes, to not walk people, to get quick outs, to these things that they need to do, and they had no one to then move into that spot. At every turn this year, they looked to their in-house candidates and said, help us, and there wasn't that help.
It's well said. On the horizon, I know they're excited about Tink Hence.
Yeah.
Still good level of excitement about Gordon Graceffo, and I actually understand why. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Right. The guy, help us out with this. I'm not sure what to make of McGreevy. In other words, I'm neutral. I'm not saying forget about it. I'm not saying he's going to be really good. I just don't know.
Yeah. He test of the development. And also he doesn't miss a lot of bats. First round pick, highest of picks. So they're going to give time. But again, it's to the development. It's all right. What they have done, what they did so well, and they developed so well, and Brent Strom was a part of that, and Tim Levesque, who's back with the team, is a big part of that. They confirmed that today.
Who is it? I'm sorry,
Tim Levesque, who's been their pitching coordinator for years. He's back.
That's good.
We knew that he would be back.
That's a good one.
But it is. Now it's about outfitting them all with what the modern team needs and what the modern pitcher expects. That's what they got to do more of. They don't have the pitching lab. That is something that frustrates Mo. It's something that Mozeliak really wanted and worked towards. They're trying to get the facility at spring training more modern, just for everybody, and that stalled out. So now it's another year. The whole thing was supposed to be done by next year. They still hope to do that. They have kind of a traveling pitching lab, but getting everybody on the same page. That's what the team asked Jeff Albert to do hitting wise. They're now working with Dusty Blake to do pitching wise. But they didn't outfit the staff until recently.
Right.
So they need to do more of that, and McGreevy's a part of it, right? In the same way that Mason Wynn's hitting was a part of what Jeff Albert, or Nolan Gorman's hitting, or any of the young hitters who were like, these guys are, for a while their Cardinals didn't have really like impact hitters. Now there's a handful of them that you're like, these are going to be impact hitters or players for them, right? Well, and that's an outgrowth of Jeff Albert and what he did throughout the whole system. They didn't do that same thing with pitching, and now they need to. And in a way, McGreevy, back to your question, McGreevy and Hence and Rogic and whoever they drafted 7th overall this coming, they're going to be the group that must benefit from that.
And I want to go back to Dusty Blake because Joe Sheehan mentioned him in a newsletter he wrote too, talking about this pitching issue, the Cardinals in effect. Loosely translated, they've just kind of fallen behind the times. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned that they're hiring a Dusty Blake, indicated, signaled that, they know this. They've fallen behind. And they're bringing him in to do the things they haven't been doing because they got to catch up. To your point, there's not the infrastructure, lack of a better term, behind them.
No, that's a great term.
So Dusty Blake, and listen, I admit it, so I don't want to be a hypocrite here. Full confession, I'd poke fun of him on the air here. What's in that iPad? I was doing the typical lazy jokes about that. Mm-hmm. But and I feel bad about it from this standpoint. Their decision to bring him in was a smart one, and it was the right way to go because he is really advanced in his techniques and his thinking, and he did it at the college level. And, by the way, that is relevant. People I've heard, who cares what he did at Duke? Well, he did. He performed basically a miracle at Duke.
Cardinal fans, Cardinal fans are about to really care about what's going on with college pitching because they're the 7th pick. But there's the chance that it's a Wake Forest guy.
I feel
that's cutting edge.
There you go. I feel a little guilty because Dusty Blake actually represents kind of that agent of change that they need. Mm-hmm. Instead, he sort of became the butt of jokes. But tell us, now that you know the premise I'm operating on here, tell us about his importance to this organization and the big league club too. Going forward, how important is he?
Don't you see a similar arc though? Right?
Yeah.
Like Jeff Albert. What were people saying about him?
Well, yeah. Again,
and now, like 12 months removed from when he left, people are like, "Man, those hitters kind of worked out." There were some rough and tumble times, and there's a real parallel to what's happening now with Dusty Blake and the pitching. Look, he's a guy who in long talks with him, and I've known him now for several years because he and Schilt had a relationship that predated Dusty joining the Cardinals, he's a good blend of them. And he comes from the college realm where he also had to scout. So it wasn't just about maximizing pitches. It was and pitch craft, if you will. It was also about simplifying that and reaching pitchers with it. It was also identifying things that guys could do and guys can't do. Like there are some guys that they can't pull off the seam shifted weight. They can't pull off a slider that we're going to call a sweeper. They can't get that. So how do you make what they do well? They do that at the best. And
that's kind of out of the Tampa playbook, too.
It is very much out of the Tampa playbook.
Like emphasize what they do well.
How to do what you do good, great, I think is what I heard described as.
Right.
I think the Reds pitching coach said it that way.
And it's logical. It makes perfect sense.
It's Sonny Gray, right? Sonny Gray goes to the Yankees, and they said, this is the pitcher you need to be. And he's like, well, I'm not really good at those. And they're like, well, this is the pitcher you need to be. And he's like, why are you making me? And all of it went to heck. But then he goes to, the Reds, and they're like, well, why don't you be really good at the kind of pitcher you are and get back to those kind of pitches? And also you have a seam-shifted sinker, and it plays, and we can make that work. And now look at him. Since then, he's one of the top 4 or 5 pitchers in baseball. And Dusty brings that kind of approach. I think it's very fascinating to look at last year through the lens of who made strides and the role that Dusty Blake had to play in that. I think we could all agree that Zach Thompson, what he did was very impressive. To be told 2 different roles multiple times through the first half of the season, and then by the end of, say, August, they're going, this is a potential starter. He made the team as a reliever, then was told, no, we're going to focus on 2025 during that weird time. We'll build you up as a starter. Oh, no, now we need you sooner. Right. He just got all moved around.
Just awful.
And the messaging was a little off. So was the need. And they just, for so long, they were like a winning team that had no idea how to stop losing. That just is what it constantly felt like around the ballpark. Like they were like, well, this is going to get right? And it was like, no, it's not. You have to know how to, and they just didn't know how. And I'm not saying that I did. I just knew how to ask questions about, like, well, what are you going to do with this? Oh, it'll get right. No, it won't. It just won't. But with Zach, he had an impressive year. And then so on the other end of the spectrum was helping Wainwright get as much as he could from a body that was saying no more. And Dusty was a big part of both of those things. And also then Liberatore in the middle there, working with him, not just on like pitches, but like, okay, here's what your body needs to be. Here's what you need to do on the mound. Here's what we can get from this information. And so you have really three different guys, one in and out of roles, one in and out of how to use his stuff and maintain velocity, which Liberatore was also working on, but that was like physical and mechanical. And then you had a veteran guy who knew how to pitch and was trying to squeeze the final pitches out of an arm that was telling him, go home.
That's right.
And Dusty played a part in all of that. And Wainwright raved about Dusty and what he meant for his mechanics.
That's something that I think is meaningful. And I know I mentioned that on the air too, but so it'll be interesting. I tell you what, we're going to take a break and then come back. I want to ask you about some other things. The state of the bullpen, do they need more? I'm giving you, not that you need to have preparation to know what to say, but also I wanted to ask you on my list, which is in my head, not written down, in what ways does Derrick Goold think that Ali Marmol can grow in part from learning from such a cruel season that tried everyone's patience and composure and everything else.
Yeah.
Derrick Goold, I mentioned I want to ask you about Ali Marmol.
Sure.
It was a tough season for him. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of things that spilled out. It just was the stress factor was huge. Full disclosure, I had a lengthy conversation with him not too long ago.
Oh, good.
To try to get to know him better. And really appreciated it. And I found him to be really reflective and, also extremely determined. And I just want to get your observation because you are there every day. I'm never there. And if you were to just take this question, and my question is, how do you think that horrible experience of 2023 will shape him in a positive way going into 2024? What do you think applies? Does anything apply that jumps out at you that you would assume there will be something positive coming out of that from what he learned?
Yeah. One thing that stands out is that I think he is very well aware of what support he needs and what role, a coaching staff / connection with players can play in giving a team balance in the choppiest of waters. There were elements that were missing last year. There were some things that really, and we can all point to the examples, but there were some things that he as a manager had to take care of that is not the manager's job. And in some ways, especially maybe even in the public eye, brought some criticism. It was like, why is he doing that? Well, the reason is because no one else would. And so the buck stops with the manager, as it should. But I think he comes out of there with a real clarity as to how do you have the support, how do you have the people, how do you have the stuff in place that can make that move before it ever gets to the manager. And I think Daniel Descalso's hire is part of that.
I like that hire a lot.
In talking with Ali, I asked him about it. I was like, look, Joe McEwing came to the rescue. He rushed to the rescue when Matt Holliday said, I want to stay home. And, we get the sense, we kind of understand now more a little bit that, Matt had his two kids. One of them is 1-1 and is now the top prospect in baseball. The other one who could be 1-1 and could be the next best prospect
right. Totally
in baseball.
Understand it.
A son who just got married. So he has a lot going on. Excuse me. But it dawned on me that the three guys that Oliver Marmol hired to be bench coach in Skip, Matt, and Daniel Descalso, all former players, all recently retired. All of them played with guys in that clubhouse. All of them not played at the same time, but were teammates or contemporaries of, and all are champions. And I asked Ollie about that. Like, what is that? Because that role we used to think of as Yoda, right?
Right.
I think I wrote this in the paper.
No,
that we used to think about it as Yoda. He thinks of it as Luke. Like, who's the guy who's learning to be the master, to be the manager, and is recently removed from this clubhouse, who's recently removed from that, who can make that connection instantly with a player about, like, yeah, I know what it's like in the box, man, as opposed to what we used to think of the bench coach was like, who can instantly remember the schedule and what to do with and where to play the infield.
Right.
It's a way different thing. And I think, like, going through last year's season gives him and that staff a really clear sense of where they were missing things, who best handles them, and how to create that support so that at times when the manager didn't have to. The manager
can't. There's so many things involved in baseball now. Information overload, but also it's so easy to lose focus of everything when you're trying to be everything and lose focus on maybe what's important.
Yeah.
But the manager, despite I think what maybe a lot of people would feel about this, the manager can't be. He can't always have to police his own clubhouse. I mean, it's like there's got to be a bit of a separation there, to where. There's no National Football League coach. There's no college football coach where I'm just using a couple different sports where they are policing everything and everybody all the time. That's why you have assistants. That's why you have assistant head coaches. That's why you put certain guys in. And I'm not taking a shot at Super Joe because Super Joe, as you said, had to rush in, but. He kind of needs a cop in there, and Descalzo's definitely got that in him.
Oh, he is.
He's an impressive guy. When he was a player, and I was in there all the time. He had a presence about him, where if he just gave you a look, I could feel it. Like, was he mad at me?
Yeah, he was like that in Memphis.
Is he mad about me about something?
Yeah.
What did I do?
He and John Jay have that same thing going.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's more presence there. And without a lot of words, I mean, he doesn't have to make a speech. There's something about the guy where you're like, you know what, this man's serious,
Well, and it's not lost on. I mean, it should not be lost on Cardinal fans that he's a World Series champion. He was part of that group, and he then went from being a Cardinal World Series champion with that reputation. Signed by multiple teams because of that, because of that presence, and because of what they wanted to become. And, oh, by the way, those teams had him blocker nearby Paul Goldschmidt, locker by Nolan Arenado, locker by Wilson Contreras. The three different teams, three different guys, now all on the same team, and all of those guys talking about, what they need as the jewel to shine on their career, and Descalzo has. And not only that, but he was brought to their original teams to bring that element to help a clubhouse with that culture. I think it's really fascinating, and I think that's a part of where you might see because you have Daniel doing that stuff, and Daniel as part of the staff, and also a bigger staff, you might see Marmol, in different ways as a manager.
It's going to be interesting
because of the
to
other
monitor,
things he can do.
Well, you mentioned Contreras.
Or he's not asked to do.
We only got a few minutes left, so I want to sneak this one in. Do you think Wilson will have what's the word? What's the term? Will he have an easier time this year? Will things be much more settled for him? Can he
earned it.
He did earn it, and he earned respect.
He's going to win I'm pretty sure it's well known. He's going to be the St. Louis Baseball Man of the Year at the Writers' Dinner this coming week.
It's terrific.
And people can still buy tickets there at the STL BBWA or St. Louis BBWAA.org. But he's going to be the Baseball Man of the Year.
Great choice.
You think about the people who have won that award, and obviously they're coming out of a losing season. But is there any question what he did? What he went through,
he was
and how he was stand up about it, and then still went out and produced. And he was also, you talk about trying to replace Nick Saban. He was asked to replace Yadier Molina.
It's just ridiculous, I know.
And it's been 12 months of pining for Yadier Molina here.
Right.
You know, and he still was like stand up about it. He wore that tribute to Yadier on opening day. Kind of forget that, right? Like he had the shoes designed and everything like that as a tribute to Molina.
He's a wonderful guy. My friend Dave Kaplan up in Chicago told me he's one of the best human beings that come through Chicago in terms of sports figures. That he thinks.
I mean, he ached for that pitching staff.
You know, he's a really, really high character guy.
Yeah.
What they did to him was terrible, and I think they all knew it, and I think they made it up to him. And I know Miles Michaelis made some comments to Jim Hayes recently that were really good to hear and good to know. You're right. Lance Lynn's going to be simpatico from day one.
Yeah.
But the actual real quick, the actual catching part, like whether it be pitch selection or whatever, do you think that part of his game will be better this season? Because he still needs to improve some, obviously, with that stuff.
He'll get more all of spring with the new guys. I think it's really important that they're all new, you know, so everybody will be learning together. I think that's a real interesting element to this. So nobody comes in with really preconceived notions, or enough guys don't. But I think that would be that's something he did not have last spring. Last spring was a lot about the mechanics and a lot about the movement behind the plate and where to receive, you know, moving closer to the plate to get the lower strikes and framing and all this work that he did there. But all those pitchers were gone. They were off at the World Baseball Classic. So a rapport and an understanding wasn't there. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have some success early on and not have everybody searching. The confidence, you know, there was a real lack of confidence there, and a lack of execution that coupled with or compounded. That's the better word. Compounded the lack of confidence. And so I think if those things change, and he gets the time to be rapport, he's established, and Sonny Gray's coming in, and Kyle Gibson's coming in, and Lynn's coming back, and he's the catcher. It's not guys coming back going, oh, we got a new catcher.
Right.
That's a subtle change, but it should give him a lot of confidence.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, he's the veteran catcher now, where those guys, like you said, are all now first-time Cardinal. Well, Lynn's a second-time Cardinal, but no, I think
they'll connect. They can commiserate over a few things.
We appreciate Derrick Goold coming in.